So without wasting much time, we've already told you why we are here. I will invite the Director for Elections, Honorable Elvis Efriye Ankra, to do two things. Number one, respond to the claims made by the EC Chairperson, Jean Mensah, and also number two, to explain to you our reason for boycotting the IPAC engagements that the EC, has been that have been going on the past 2 days. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me invite to the podium now our Director for Elections, Honorable Elvis Efriye Ankra, to address us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Sami Jemfi, National Chairman, members of FEC, and all dignitaries present, all other protocols observed. Thank you for your presence here this afternoon. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the media. You are welcome to the headquarters of the NDC for this all-important press conference. The NDC has taken notice of several false claims made by the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Mrs. Jane Adukwe-Mensah, in a speech delivered at the just-ended two-day workshop between the EC and the Inter-Party Advisory Committee, IPAC, at Alisa Hotel in Accra. The purpose of this press conference is to formally respond to and expose the many unfounded claims peddled by the EC chairperson in a speech at the program, and to explain to you the reasons for our boycott of these IPAC engagements. Friends from the media, contrary to the claims by the EC chairperson that the 2020 general elections was the best ever in the history of this country and calls for the nation to celebrate some so-called unprecedented successes struck by the EC in the conduct of the elections, the facts show that last year's elections was one of the most poorly conducted, flawed, and manipulated elections in the history of this country. A situation that has undermined the strides we have made since the inception of this fourth Republican democratic dispensation. And we say this for the following reasons. One, the dubious handling of the printing and distribution of ballot papers and other electoral materials that led to ballot stuffing by the MPP in their strongholds and other regions. You will recall that we invited you here and showed you videos of over 1 million ballot papers that we found after the distribution of ballot papers. And those ballot papers were meant for Ashanti region. Again, during the elections, we found ballot papers that had been thumb-printed with this authenticated with the EC's own validation stamp in several parts of the Ashanti region. And in fact, in some constituencies, because the alarm was raised, those ballot papers were dumped. And we have cause to believe, based on our final assessment, that some of these ballot papers found their way into the ballot boxes in the strongholds of the MPP. Two, the unprecedented number of rejected ballots recorded in the elections, owing largely to the incompetence and recklessness of the EC in using unapproved stamp pads instead of the approved voting ink pad that we have used in previous elections. Again, you will recall that in this particular election, the EC, for some strange reason, decided to use some very strange stamp pads. And what happens is that when people go and vote and they fold the ballot, because there's so much liquid in the ink pad, it then sticks onto the other side of the ballot. And that is one of the reasons why we had so many rejected ballots. Three, the use of illegal statement of polls pink sheets, that is from HB, that omitted BVD entries in about 7,581 polling stations, thereby undermining the ballot accounting process and the integrity of the entire results. This totally belies the false claim by the EC and GEMENSA that only 11,000 people voted by manual verification in the 2020 general elections. And this is very serious because the Form 8B is a legal form. The EC presented that to Parliament, how the form should be, what should be on the form, and Parliament approved it. Subsequently, just a few days before the election, we noticed that the form that they had printed and were going to distribute across the country was different from the form that had been approved by Parliament. And the significant omission was that where you could do proper ballot accounting, where you could determine whether people voted manually or biometrically, was not in there. And we insisted, I recall we even called a press conference and informed you. And when we insisted, and there was directive at IPAC that they should go and reprint a day or 2 days before the election, they came and said they were putting stamps on those forms. And in many of those cases, the forms were not filled. And when that happens, you cannot properly account for the people who voted either biometrically or manually. 4, widespread cases of patent arithmetic errors on the faces of pink sheets and constituency results summary sheets, on the faces of pink sheets and constituency results summary sheets by incompetent EC staff in the filling of electoral forms and aggregation of valid votes. 5, manipulation of figures by the EC leading to a disparity between constituency collated results aggregates and regional collated results aggregates. So if you put together all the collated results from the constituencies based on the pink sheets, minus Techiman South, what you get is 13,118,640. Now, if you put together all the regional collating sheets, you put all together, what you get is 13,119,460. So clearly, there was a problem somewhere, and it was due to deliberate manipulation, in our view. Pardon of votes at the constituency collation centers in favor of candidate Akufo-Addo. What it means is that at the end of the polls, at some polling stations, if candidate Akufo-Addo got maybe 540 votes, they will add maybe 20 to it. And you put all together, this is not allowed. It is illegal. 7, no proper collation at the National Collation Center by the returning officer for the presidential elections, Mrs. Jane Adukwe Mensah. And you all recall all the incidents that happened at the collation center where our agents there said they didn't even have the opportunity to see and verify the results that were coming from some of the regions before she subsequently went and announced the results. 8, unprecedented cases of state-sponsored violence and murder at constituency collation centers, occasioned by the reckless and unlawful conduct of some EC officials and the despotic Akufo-Addo government, and in contravention of our time-tested election security arrangements. Now, this is an election where we have counted 8 people dead. If you add Silas, who was murdered during the registration process, that is 9. It has never, ever, ever happened in this country before. After an election, you have 8 souls, 8 innocent Ghanaians, including 14-year-olds, killed. And you say this was the best election ever? Are we serious? Are we for real? 8 people died, perished. And you said this was the best election? And some of these violence acts were occasioned by the activities of the EC themselves. Look at Techiman South. It was as a result of the conduct of the returning officer. That is what occasioned the violence. So the EC cannot absolve itself of blame. And indeed, the security arrangement has always been that during an election period, the political officers, that is the district chief executives, municipal chief executives, metropolitan chief executives, they recuse themselves, and then the head of security in the region takes over the security arrangements, with the electoral commission officer becoming the secretary to the security committee. And they put in place the modalities for security. So the EC is part of that security architecture. So they cannot absolve themselves. And they presented a budget to Parliament, and in that budget, security arrangements were part of it. So if you've presented a budget for security arrangements, how then do you turn around and say you were not responsible for the security arrangements? That is totally untenable and unacceptable. 9, also contrary to the claim that the international community has hailed the conduct of the 2020 general elections, as Jane Mensah will have us believe, the European Union is on record to have decried the non-transparency of the collation process for the elections. So flawed was the conduct of the 2020 general elections that for the first time in the history of this country, a whole district made up of Santro Kofi, Akpafu, Lipe, and Lolobi Sal communities were deliberately disenfranchised by the EC for the sole purpose of assisting the NPP candidate John Peter Amewu win the Hawkeye seat. Is this what Jane Mensah and her bias commission is inviting us to celebrate? That a whole community will go for an election, they vote for parliamentary, presidential elections. In fact, they were informed that they were going to vote. And just a few days before, a night before, by administrative fiat, against the Constitution, against common sense, against the rule of law, against the right of representation of people, you just decide that they cannot vote. And you say we should celebrate this, and this was the best election? Again, 11 or 10. The claim by the EC that an amount of $90 million was saved in the conduct of the 2020 general elections is completely contrived. The facts show that the state incurred avoidable financial loss as a result of the procurement of a facial recognition technology by the EC that turned out to be a fiasco. You recall, before the registration exercise, which we protested against, and which many right-thinking Ghanaians, CSOs, all over the place said it wasn't necessary, one of their major defenses was that they were procuring a software that had the capacity for facial recognition. So if you go and your fingerprint could not be picked by the BVD, there will be facial recognition. How many of you went to vote and there was any facial recognition? 0. And yet, the cost of the equipment was high because of that so-called facial recognition. And that facial recognition became almost redundant during the elections. So it is therefore ridiculous and laughable, to say the least, that the election management body that has failed to pay its temporary staff their allowances 5 months after an election will make the claim that they saved the nation money. Are you aware that the temporary staff who worked for the EC all across the country, they've not been paid? Are you aware, media? And so you haven't paid the people who worked for you. And then you turn around 5 months after, you say you have saved the country money. What kind of accounting is this? Does it make sense? We wish to entreat the public to treat this baseless claim with the contempt it deserves and wait for a credible audit into the EC's expenditure for the 2020 general elections. And I think Parliament should be preparing to invite them to come and explain. The people who worked, put their lives on the line that day, they are Ghanaians, they deserve to be paid. It is only after such a process by an independent entity that we can validate her claims. Now we come to the next reason for our press conference, that proposed reforms by the Electoral Commission. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we have taken note of some proposals for reforms that the Electoral Commission has put forward for the consideration of IPAC. However, in our view, the first and most important reform required is for the EC to reform itself. Particularly, Jane Mensah and Boss Manasseh, they must be the first to reform and change their attitude of arrogance and bias. Ladies and gentlemen, we have worked with various commissioners. We've worked with Dr. Farijan. The posturing and attitude of Jane Mensah and Boss Manasseh is that of unbridled arrogance, pomposity, bias, and disrespect, particularly for the NDC and its national officers. And you can bear testimony of the numerous instances. You go for a meeting with this woman, things that were not on the agenda. After the meeting, she comes out, releases a statement, and says, we all agreed on something we didn't even discuss, which was not on the agenda. You go for a meeting, General Secretary chuckles, he says, you can't laugh in my meeting. Complete disrespect. Proposals upon proposals, inputs upon inputs. There is not even one, single one, since this EC came to power, that the NDC has put forward that they have listened to. And in many instances, we have been vindicated, and we'll come to that. So they must reform themselves first. So I'll now proceed to do a critical and objective analysis of the 4 reform proposals put forward by the EC. 1, closure of polls at 3 p.m. in 2024. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, the NDC finds a proposal by the Jane Mensah-led EC to change the closing time of polls from 5 p.m. to 3 p.m. in 2024 baffling and mind-boggling. Since the 1992 elections, polls have always closed at 5 p.m. This has worked perfectly without any challenges whatsoever. It therefore beggars belief that the EC would want to change this time-tested arrangement and go for a poorly thought-through alternative, which is bound to disenfranchise eligible voters and create needless problems for our electoral system. This is particularly so given the undue delay we usually record in the delivery of electoral materials to some polling stations and other technical challenges that usually characterize voting in this country. Ghanaians will recall, so before I go into that, even with the 5 o'clock, there are instances in some parts of the country that because materials did not arrive early, voting continued beyond the 5 o'clock. Machines got spoiled, etc. So many, and it's been going on consistently. And then now you want to close at 3 o'clock. Ghana is not Accra and Kumasi and Takrady. In some of the rural areas, the poor farmers, they have to go to the farm, get some food for the day before they come and vote. So you create a situation where you are going to create unnecessary panic, tension, and confusion. Is this necessary at this time? Ghanaians will recall how a similar hasty decision by the EC to declare results within 24 hours after closure of polls in the 2020 elections failed miserably and led to the rushed declaration of a patently flawed results that yielded a percentage aggregate of more than 100% by the returning officer, Madame Jane Adukwe Mensah. One would have thought that Jane Mensah would have learned the right lessons by now, but that appears not to be the case. You were all here when they announced that they were going to declare results in 24 hours. You were all here. We told you and we told them, this is not going to work. It doesn't make sense. As usual. So when we say she is arrogant, disrespectful, that is another classical example. We told you, we told her, it is not going to work. What happened? Eventually, she had to eat back her own words and then declare the results on the 9th. And even on the 9th, look at the results. You declare results which, when you put all together, is over 100%. Common arithmetic. Because of the rush, the indecent haste And then you do a correction. That correction too is wrong. You do a third correction. That one too, we go to court. Then you produce a figure different from the first two. So as we speak today, we don't know the actual results of the elections. And you say this is the best results, and now you are coming to introduce something that can lead to chaos in this country. Friends from the media, our position on this proposal is simple. The current arrangements of closing polls at 5 p.m. has worked perfectly in 7 general elections in this country and does not require any fixing. And to quote her, she said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if the 5 p.m. hasn't caused us any problems over the past 7 elections, why do you want to change it? For what purpose? Is it an attempt to create a situation where if materials delay in the strongholds of some parties, 3 o'clock, they say they've closed. So you disenfranchise some people? They are the ones who open room for people to speculate because it's a completely unreasonable proposition. 2, substitution of periodic mass registration with continuous registration. We wish to remind the Electoral Commission that the all-round continuous registration of eligible voters is not new. The law requires the Commission to put in place mechanisms to ensure that at any time that citizens become eligible to vote, they can be registered. However, there are systems of checks and balances that we all agreed at IPAC, so that it was done as it last Friday of every month. So when that time comes, the political parties are there to ensure that the system is not abused. So if you say there should be continuous registration all year, are we going to employ people and put them, the political parties, at the various EC district offices so that they can be monitoring what goes on? Because we know that every system is subject to manipulation and abuse. However, continuous registration cannot be a substitute for periodic nationwide registration because the all-round registration can only be done at the district offices of the Electoral Commission. And again, this Accra-Kumasi type of thinking, where you think that Ghana is Accra-Kumasi, people have to travel several kilometers to district offices, and not everyone can do this. For some poor farmer in some village, 5 cities, 10 cities from his village to the district center is a problem. How much yam would he, or cassava, or plantain would he harvest, sell, get some to feed, get some to buy kerosene, get some to buy salt and fish, and use some to travel to a district center? The law requires the Commission to put in place mechanisms to ensure that anytime citizens become eligible to vote, they can be registered. Secondly, political parties always assign agents to observe the voters' registration process. It would therefore be ludicrous for the EC to suggest that political parties should employ permanent agents at their district offices to observe the registration of eligible voters all year round. This proposal also comes against a major challenge of transparency in verifying the claims of prospective registrants at the district office level. Even the registration normal that we are all there seeing, they are stealing. Then the one you won't be there. What do you think will happen? 3, introducing all year-round voter exhibition exercise through the use of technology. The proposals of the EC to have a year-round exhibition is a laudable idea, but cannot be a substitute for the periodic exhibition exercise of the voters' register that is normally done after voter registration. This is simply because the voter exhibition exercise is not only intended to afford voters the opportunity to verify and confirm their details, but also, and this is important. 1, to ensure ineligible registrants, minors and foreigners, are challenged and removed from the register. 2, to help clean the names of dead people from the register. 3, afford voters the opportunity to confirm their captured biometric features. All these things cannot be done through the system the EC is proposing. So if you say people should just get up and go and register, how are you going to check? How are you going to remove dead names from the register? And how can you ensure that people confirm their biometric details, which we spend so much money to buy equipment for? Given the errors that occurred in the run-up to the 2020 elections when the system was deployed, and the fact that not all Ghanaians have mobile phones to assist the system, it cannot be a replacement for periodic voters registration exhibition. 4, that's their 4th proposition, is to restrict data entry of election results to the constituency coalition level and generate national, regional, and national reports. The proposal to have the entry point of data done only at constituency coalition centers will introduce another set of opportunities for rigging and manipulation of the election through hacking and other means. The way to build further efficiencies into the coalition process and eliminate minor inaccuracies is to hire and train competent EC staff to ensure accurate data entry and collation, and not to throw away the time-tested practices of collation at the national level. Data entry and collation must be done at the constituency level and sent to the National Collation Center for aggregation by the returning officer and with the participation of political party representatives. This will ensure accuracy and transparency in the aggregation of constituency results for free and fair election results declaration. So we're saying that we would check the results at the constituency level. The EC is proposing that once that is done through a system, electronic means, that's it. We're saying no, we should do it again at the national center to validate whatever has come in from the constituency. Because between the national and the constituency, many things happen. You recall in 2016, the EC themselves said their system had been hacked. And indeed, at IPAC, a committee was set up. The NDC had a representative to go into that hacking matter. The committee met once or twice, and nothing. Again, the EC, the J. Mensah-led EC, they were no longer interested in finding out what happened to the so-called hacking in 2016. So we cannot leave our destiny in the hands of any electronic system without putting in place checks and measures to ensure that it's not manipulated. Now to our boycott of IPAC. As you may be aware, the National Democratic Congress has decided to boycott IPAC temporarily due to the bastardization of that revered body by the Jane Mensah Bosman Asare-led Electoral Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, the framers of the 1992 Constitution, in their wisdom, created the Electoral Commission as an independent institution to perform its constitutional functions without the control of any person or group of persons. The independence given to the Electoral Commission under the 1992 Constitution is based on the presumption that the Electoral Commission will at all times perform its duties conscientiously in the ultimate interest of Ghana and Ghanaians. However, this does not mean that the Commission is not accountable to the people and can therefore decide to act whimsically or capriciously in ways that undermine our democratic experiment. Unfortunately, the Jane Mensah-led Electoral Commission has interpreted this independence to mean arrogance and non-accountability. And they've said it several times. You know, Bossman, we are not bound by IPAC decisions. IPAC can only advise us. We are not bound. Meanwhile, all the reforms that we've had came through IPAC. So it is that posturing. And it is sad that the Supreme Court of the country endorsed this irresponsible conduct of the EC and allowed them to get away with the embarrassment they caused this country in the 2020 general elections. Ladies and gentlemen, one unique convention of Ghana's electoral system, which has become international best practice, is the Inter-Party Advisory Committee, IPAC. The rationale for IPAC, as it has been over the years, is to create a platform for consensus building on major issues affecting elections with key stakeholders involved in elections. Over the years, IPAC has served Ghana well as a platform where ideas are shared on various issues before the EC takes substantive decisions on critical electoral issues. Indeed, to promote transparency in our electoral process, IPAC has been involved in the drafting of constitutional instruments on elections, as well as procurement processes of the EC and the previous EC chairpersons. IPAC is supposed to serve as a platform where political parties participate in all electoral activities throughout the electoral cycle, such as voter registration, exhibition of the voters' register, printing of ballot papers, observing the voting process at all polling stations through polling agents, as well as collation of results at both the constituency and national levels. Unfortunately, since the June 2018 ouster of the chairperson of the Electoral Commission and her two deputies, and their subsequent replacement with Jane Mensah and Bosman Asari, all these best practices have been thrown to the dogs. The current leadership of the Electoral Commission has turned IPAC from a consultative and consensus-building platform to an information-sharing platform where the EC only comes to impose its decisions on IPAC without room for deliberations and exchange of ideas. It became so bad to the point that the EC even publicly announced that IPAC had agreed to the decision to compile a new register for the 2020 elections when the issue of a new register had not even been discussed at the said meeting. And I'm sure you all recall that issue. Ladies and gentlemen, the Jane Mensah-led EC appears to be in a world of its own. The Commission appears to be tickling itself and laughing. The Electoral Commission has, for the first time in our history, conducted elections that leaves doubts on the minds of Ghanaians and other observers on the credibility of the elections. The Commission declared wrong results, and even after issuing an unsigned press release to subsequently correct same, the figures still do not add up. Instead of taking advantage of the election petition to clear itself of the mess caused, the EC failed to mount the witness box to testify and explain to Ghanaians how it arrived at its results. It is this same belligerent posture of the EC that has led to the situation where, for the first time in the... I think this is a repetition of a page. Yeah. All right? Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So, right. Ladies and gentlemen, after a painstaking review of the 2020 elections, the following are the preliminary proposals for electoral reforms which the NDC intends to engage various stakeholders such as the media, civil society organizations, religious leaders, traditional leaders, development partners, the diplomatic community, and the general public. These preliminary proposals are as follows. 1, that the participation of IPAC and its advisory role in the electoral process should be given legal backing without encroaching on the constitutional independence of the Electoral Commission. 2, that the EC adopts an equitable voting formula for political parties in IPAC deliberations based on their representation in Parliament. So as we speak now, there are 2 parties with representation in Parliament, the NDC and MPP. Based on the EC's own results, the NDC had 47 point whatever. So these are major reforms. We had 6.2 million plus Ghanaians voted for the NDC. Now, basic common sense, courtesy, logic. You think that the EC thinks they can do reforms and they won't take into account the NDC's position? Does it make sense? So you see where they are leading us to. And it is because of that posturing that they can do whatever they want. So you have a situation, and let me just say, we have respect for all political parties, but there are rules also that govern who or what a political party is. So you cannot have a situation where a party that has 137 seats in Parliament, we go for meeting, our opponents, the MPP, they also have 137 seats. And then you have parties that have no seats. Not to talk about even whether they are nationally represented. That's not for me to determine. Okay, they didn't even participate in the elections. And you say when we go and vote, I should have 1 vote, MPP should have 1 vote, and all those parties singularly should have 1 vote. So when you bring together all those 20 or so parties, out of them we have 1 vote. Does it make sense? You didn't participate in the elections. And they have been recruited by the EC to deceive themselves and Ghanaians. That is fraudulent behavior. Countrymen, what is going on in this country is frightening. The EC is the institution that is supposed to ensure that the laws governing political parties are obeyed. So for purposes of achieving whatever agenda, entities that they know would ordinarily not qualify, even to be political parties, they recruit and mobilize them, bring them, then they will all say, we agree, and we sign. Then the NDC, which is the biggest opposition party, we are 1. Is this for real? So when we go to IPAC meetings, our presence and input doesn't make any difference. Do you understand? Because it doesn't matter how sane and sanguine your arguments are, they'll just mobilize those people. Okay, so let's vote. Then if you are the cause of this world, then they all, yeah. I mean, this is a sham. It's duplicity at its highest. And we shouldn't allow this to pass. Don't let anybody throw wool over your eyes. You don't go to IPAC. This is it. It's a sham. And if there are no fundamental changes, it will just be a complete waste of everybody's time. So the EC must adopt an equitable voting formula for political parties in IPAC deliberations based on their representation in Parliament. We are not saying other parties who otherwise qualify cannot be part of IPAC. That's not what we're saying. In fact, Madame J. Mensah, when she was with IE and she was doing the political parties program, somebody should ask her, why is it that in that program, she didn't say every party should come to that program? The basis for participation in that program was representation in Parliament. No, be so. There was a logic to it. So how come that now you are at IPAC? You are at EC. Again, let me put on record. We don't have any problem with other political parties. We don't have any problem with their existence, but we're saying that there should be common sense and logic And when it comes to this, you cannot say that a party that has 137 seats in parliament should go and then you bring 20 other parties, most of them don't have any seat, didn't participate in the election, and they all have one vote. That is why, again, at IPAC, when we form the committees, what happens is that the MPP has one representative, the NDC has one representative, and all the other political parties have one representative. Maybe you can argue that they could have a couple more, whatever. But there should be some sanguinity in this thing, not just any bizarre and perverse, arrangement. Thank you. That the Electoral Commission complies with the use of the legally prescribed statement of poll pink sheet from 8A and 8B, provided for in our election regulations, to prevent the omission of BVD entries so as to preserve the ballot accounting process and make it possible to check multiple voting, ballot stuffing, impersonation, and other forms of rigging. This is a very serious matter because the forms are designed in a particular way for you to be able to do proper ballot accounting. So once the forms do not work, and this is one of the reasons why we ask for discovery and examination of documents at the Supreme Court. And yet the Supreme Court did not grant us our wish. Next, that the high rate of rejected ballots recorded in the 2020 general elections be addressed through the use of appropriate ink pads, and that same should be stipulated in our election regulations. 5, that the EC employs and trains highly competent staff to accurately fill election results form and collate results so as to forestall the recurrence of the widespread cases of arithmetic errors recorded in the 2020 elections. Finally, that the Electoral Commission reverts to the time-tested election security arrangement where the deployment of security for election purposes is reserved to the Ghana Police Service, acting within a framework provided by the Electoral Commission. This security arrangement should have minimum involvement of the military and no interference. I repeat, no interference. For the last time, no interference by the so-called national security operatives as recommended by the Emil Short Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, to bring this address to an end, let me just inform you that the proposals we have made are just preliminary proposals. We have set up a high-powered committee to look at various reforms of our entire electoral process. And sooner than later, we're going to come out with a comprehensive set of proposals. We thank you very much for your attention. God bless you.
Thank you very much for your patience. We will open the floor for questions, and after the first round of questions, I will appeal to others to do a brief summary of his presentation in the Twi language for purposes of the local stations which are here. So if you have a question, please, only journalists are allowed to ask questions. If you have a question, just raise up your hand. You tell us your name, your media organization, and you ask your question. Thank you. I have a question. So can you give him the microphone? And please, let's be minded. Okay, let's be minded by the fact that COVID is still with us, so let's observe the protocols, yes. So I will be grateful if you can get them a sanitizer for the microphone. Akuga. Yeah.
I feel very intimidated, but...
Oh, come on.
But my own colleagues, it's fine. Mr. Ovizefri Yankra, there are quite a number of things you've said, and let me just dwell on just about 3 of them. First of all, the Electoral Commission tells us that you were duly invited to come for this stakeholders engagement, which of course you declined. Now your critics say, if you had been there, these reforms that you proposed may have been factored into the decision IPAC took. And we are told that that meeting or that decision is binding on all political parties, including the NDC. How do you respond to that? That is number one. And then two, again, we are told that the decisions that have been taken are not cast in stone. They are now going to Parliament.
So they are binding, but they are not cast in stone.
They are now going to Parliament.
Who are they going to be in Parliament?
Of course, parliamentarians. I mean, to ensure.
And even before that, the reforms are binding. The recommendations are binding.
That's what we've been told.
Ah, okay.
Right.
Continue.
So they are going to Parliament to get legal backing to the effect that polls will close at 3 p.m. Is that okay or satisfactory for the NDC, knowing that the EC will going to Parliament to get legal backing, and then finally?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jeffrey, thank you.
Oh, feel free. Okay, who is next? Who is next? Any other question? Please, can you come here?
Yes, boss. Madugo Ebenezer, Atenkan TV.
Respectfully, please, let's have order in the auditorium. Thank you.
You made us know that this is a temporal something pulling out from the IPAC.
The boycott of IPAC.
Yeah.
It's a temporal boycott.
Does it mean until these recommendations are implemented, you're not going back?
Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Humu Abdullah, GTV. You did say that your boycott of the IPAC meeting is temporary. Until when will you go back? And whilst you are out of the meetings, how are you going to ensure that these your recommended reforms are taken by the EC to be part of the reforms they have recommended?
Thank you. Any other?
Any other, please?
Okay.
Any other? Okay. So, Honorable Elvis will provide quick answers, and when he's done, we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much for your questions. Baka, I think that your question and follow-up is a reflection of all that we've been saying. On one hand, the EC says your decisions are binding. They are binding on the NDC. The NDC, the biggest opposition party, with 137 members of parliament and a speaker, your decisions are binding on us. In other words, he's telling us, take it or leave it. To hell with you. Is this not precisely what we are saying? It's a confirmation. It's a confirmation of precisely what we have been saying, that the attitude and posturing of the EC has been one of arrogance, disrespect, bias, open and complete bias. And that is why we've given you precedents, several precedents, to show that you go to meetings, you raise cogent issues. Once they've taken, don't forget that yesterday they came out, she did a press conference, right? Then today, they came out with a communique. Tell me what was the difference between the press conference and the communique. So it was predetermined. This is what we want to do. And eventually, this is what they will do. And we're saying that on the basis of that posturing, it becomes completely useless for us to participate in that arena. And so, we're saying that our team, what we've presented are just preliminary proposals. They are working on comprehensive proposals, and we are going to engage the Ghanaian public, because the EC, you see, there's a very perverse interpretation of independence which the EC must cure itself of. You understand me? We will engage the public that pays them because it's Ghanaians that paid them. They are not an entity unto themselves. They are there to serve the public. We will engage civil society, we will engage religious leaders, we will engage the media, we will engage the totality of Ghanaians, put our proposals forward, and together we'll put pressure on them to ensure that the right thing is done. Otherwise, it's business as usual. It's just going to be business as usual. You will go, you will talk. They will say, all of you, all the yes say, how do they say it in Parliament? Say aye. All who are for say aye, then aye. All against say no. Even if you shout louder, so the ayes have it. So we are not in for that circus. Okay? So their attitude and posturing must change. And that answers the second question. That if the NC, and the first step is that we are preparing our proposals. And you see, let's get this thing clear. Listen very carefully. Anybody who thinks that the EC can do whatever it wants, they may have gotten away with some things in the past. Going forward, anybody who thinks that the EC can do whatever they want and get away with it in 2024, that person must be living in cuckoo land. No further comments.
So, ladies and gentlemen, just to reiterate the point Honorable Elvis made. Like he has already stated, our boycott of IPAC is a temporary one. There were some questions as to, okay, until when will you be going back? The NDC is ever willing to engage in IPAC meetings and engage the EC, provided that the current modus operandi of IPAC is reviewed. Because like Honorable Elvis explained, the current system when it comes to representation and voting on key issues does not allow for meaningful deliberations and consensus building. A friend of mine, somebody was telling me this morning that system is like a headmistress-student relationship system, where the headmistress walks in, delivers a speech, your views are sought, you say whatever you want, say, okay, we've heard you, but your views are not binding on us, so that is it. You understand? So it is that headmistress-student relationship we are against. It is that dictatorial posture we are against. Okay? And then secondly, the voting arrangement at IPAC must be in consonance with, must be equitable, first of all. And when we say it must be equitable, we are talking about that voting arrangement being in accordance with the strength of political parties in Parliament, as the case is at the IE. And this is an issue that you, our friends in the media, must take up seriously. Chairman was just telling me that in the processes leading to the compilation of the first biometric register under the leadership of Afarijan, a committee was set up, on the procurement of the systems for that process and the compilation of that biometric register. The NDC had one representative on that committee. The MPP also had one, and all the other political parties had one. Now, like Honorable Elvis said, we are amenable to any increments in the quota that is given to the other political parties. But to give all political parties the same voting rights as the MPP and the NDC, just because the MPP is in cahoots with the EC and have succeeded in recruiting some mushroom political parties to do their bidding at IPAC, is not fair and totally undermines the purpose of IPAC. Earlier today, Chairman, can I have your phone? Earlier today, the EC issued a communique after a communique on the back of the two-day workshop. No, Chairman's phone. The two-day workshop, which was just concluded today at Alisa Hotel. I just want to share with you. Yes. I just want to share with you some of the political parties who were present at this IPAC meeting and have actually signed a communique, so that you appreciate, because sometimes even some of our own members don't appreciate the reason for the boycott. So you have, of course, we know the CPP, PNC, you know, these are respectable political parties. I mean, we don't have anything against any political party, but just take a lesson at some of the political parties which were there. UDS party, ULP party. I don't know. I actually don't know. They've written UDS. Then there is ULP party. Then there is PUP party. Then there is GMP party. Of course, we know of GUM. We also know of GCPP. We know of PPP. Then there is IPS. I don't know which political party is that. And then LPG is Kofi Palu's party. I don't know whether they even participated in last year's elections. Yes, of course, we know of the respectable APC and the other political. So you see, you can go for these meetings, raise all the issues we have raised here with you, and when it comes to voting, the EC will say, okay, in any case, your decisions are not binding on us, but let's take a vote. And all these political parties who are there to do the bidding, and not all the political parties I mentioned, like CPP, PPP, APC, and there are other political, PNC and all that. But of course, you know the mushroom political parties I'm talking about. Some of whom don't even have political, offices in this country, are called upon and they are giving one vote. One vote. Then the NDC, one vote. And so it becomes an exercise in futility. And that is why, as part of the preliminary reforms that we are proposing that legal backing should be given to the advisory role of IPAC. Yes, the EC is constitutionally independent and not subject to the control of anybody or person, but legislation can be passed to give legal backing to IPAC so that it is not treated anyhow by the EC. And we can do that without encroaching on the constitutional independence of the Electoral Commission. The Council of State is an advisory body, yet it is provided for under the constitution of this country. The Peace Council is a similar body, but yet there is legislation backing the Peace Council to give legitimacy to their work. And these are the reforms we are proposing. Once we are assured that we will have fair, representation at IPAC, equitable voting rights at IPAC, and this dictatorial posture of the EC will change, the NDC will attend IPAC meetings and engage the EC at that level. But until then, we will continue raising these issues. These are just preliminary reform proposals. At the right time, a comprehensive document on our proposals, that is for the 2024 election, will be outlined. We'll be writing to the Electoral Commission, we'll be engaging them, but we'll be engaging other stakeholders in our democratic process, like you in the media, the diplomatic community, our chiefs, our clergy. And we hope that the EC, CSO, civil society, and we hope that the EC will see reason and change some of these things. So I don't think we have any more questions, but I will just do a quick summary of what Honorable Elvis presented in the P language so that the P stations here can record that. We'll plead with the English stations here to bear with us. Just be patient. Let your cameras remain in their positions because this is also very important. In the for the own say Enra and Banodaniba Electoral Commission. Eden Simfua Bituja Ewo Alisa Hotel. Ebra na isine political parties ewo IPAC eyen shiamu afa 2020 abato. Na nsemeno tofa nyina ne se Jimensa oda isi ano kasamu no. Omane koye se 2020 abato ayekoto ye no. Bibia akoso kama ewo se as oman no ye celebrity nyema omutumi achieve ye in that election. Eno ene ya fremu a yenso ye de ya no December ewo sansem no eto monim se the C 2020 abatoɔ ni mu na yɛn nyinaa yɛ nim sɛmwa enti enye afi na jimensa eba beto anansesem bi akyerɛ yɛn na yɛn nyinaa yɛ nim sɛ 2020 abatoɔ no ɛyɛ abatoɔ baako a mmara nyɛ adwuma wom asisie mum na ɛyɛ adwuma wom na deɛ na Ghana fo hwehwɛ a ɔmo da na di wɔn abatoɔ mu no isifoɔ no ɛkwati yɛ no ɔmo ka hyɛɛ ɛno nti yɛabɔbɔ nsɛmfua bɛɛ ɛnyɛma bɛɛ sɛ edu a ankɔ so yie ɛwɔ 2020 abatoɔ ni mu a isifoɔ aka hyɛ na ɔmo mpɛ sɛ yɛbɛdi ɛho nkɔmmɔ deɛ di kan ɛyɛ ballot papers ɛne voting materials a isifoɔ ɛprinteyɛ nanso ɔmo fa aka na nakwan so ɛma MPP foɔ nya saa ballot papers ni bia ɛno ɛna ɔmo de hyehyɛ ɔmo ho de kɔgugu ballot box mu ɛwɔ mmeammea bebree deɛ obroni friend ballot staffing ɛde wia abani mu and we enye busrimka ɛho adanse wɔ hɔ a ugugu sisi ya ubehu bi MPP mranti a wɔdwe so wasawase ne mmeammea bebree yɛ kye ɔmo so ɔmo kita original ballot papers a isi nko na wo bi na ɔmo wɔ the yellow validation stamps of EC behind those ballot papers a ɛkyerɛ pefe sɛ EC for ka ho bi na sa MPP for ni nya sa ballot papers no e di ko gu adaka mu ti sɛ saa de we si 2020 abatoɔ mu dia na ye ma meji men sentiment ka sɛ abatoɔ no bibia akɔso kama kama ɛno nti no ye nyina ye mu no se de ɛtɔ so mienu ɛne sɛ wo hwɛ emadodo a ɛsɛyɛ rejected ballots ɛwɔ 2020 abatoɔ ni mu a ebi nsi Ghana bakɔsɛ mu da over 300,000 over 300,000 na yehwehwɛ mu ama yehu sɛ de ma ne ba saa no ɛyɛ EC adwuma a ɔmo nye ne yie na woka bibi a kyerɛ wɔ mo a ɔmo ntie because wo hwɛ inka ɛno ɛna yɛde yɛkokrumuti ne bom na yɛde tim mmra yɛto aba efiri mmerɛ tenten bisi na ne yɛwɔ deɛ mmra ne kyerɛ sɛ wɔsi yɛ yusu but afi abatoɔ mu no mo hwɛ ya office stamp and na polling stations bebree easy for you so here na de ate ne say office stamp no you so wo mu ne dɔɔso nti wo de no etim de to aba na wo bobɔ krata na wo de to aba no wa mobɔ ne yi a ink ni timi yi ba bi bebree na fe ama ballot no aye rejected ballots ne ato atwa eno ne ma de dɔɔso de atoso biem ya ka sɛ wo hwɛ pink sheets eno ne yeto aba wie ne ye kenkan results na ye twere results a candidate bi anya at the polling station was so na emra no e kire pink sheet kure was ye use emra ne se sa pink sheet no e was say nipa dodo a e de biometric verification device to aba no ye hwe machine so ne ye hwe sa number no ne ye twere ne wo pink sheet ne so se ne be ya ye be kan ma ne nyina wie no se emma dodo a ye be kan no e dɔɔso e kyen nipa dodo a de afidie ne to aba na just ye hu se bi man fa fidie na nto aba ebi man fa fidie na nto aba so de na kyerɛ sɛ obi betumi ato aba mienu de friend multiple voting and now we betumi de obi di ato aba de friend impersonation afi aba to emu yi pink sheets a easy for you su ye no baby ani ho a de mmara ne kyerɛ sɛ wɔse ye no ɔmo ye enti on the pink sheets no nipa dodo we de BVD to aba no yan capture wo ho. And this happened in about 7,800 polling stations. And my woman brought 2 million votes. So it affected the integrity of the results. Now, to say the Honorable Elvis Khan, you know, say you call Supreme Court, yes, court, and they say, Omoma easy for produce voting materials, ne pink sheets, you know, na inspector, no, and a court on a man, because I don't see when you are bedadi. Ama, the Amranes, you know. Court no etimi aye but ankoba ne sa ebiem te say de mu hu no court no nkontabu a na wo say EC for no ye on the faces of constituency summary sheets ne pink sheets no bebre wo ha o mutitin ezan say adwumayefo ne bebre wo ha na o ma bombon they were very incompetent enti mo beka ya Techiman South coalition sheets ba up e wo Supreme Court a okay, candidates in Nya boom, we one figure 99,000 something, but easy for naturally 97,000. And we call so baby and no can who been tina, ya to abani way, have a total valid votes no senya isi for ntimi nkyerɛ because of these arithmetic errors and in some cases deliberate manipulation of figures. There also be so pardon of votes. Constituency coalition centers bebrea. We share Mampenye Kufuado ma wunya polling stations that was our constituency na. It wasn't canon ye kikabum de manana. Isi for ni bi at the money be can ho. So na o can see oh pardon it dear. Only 5,700 penny munya ho dance ku Supreme Court. Na I know ye insignificant. Abusian for so obokro no na ye chewa wuntumi nka se sika wi a enisua. Nti wo kro no na wabɔ no insignificant. Pardon chrono. Inti ni say one case of pardon cry den eba. So 5,700 cases of pardon in favor of Akufo-Addo ni hu ya. Ye nim de besi 2024 ebia na no de akwa ye 30,000 and 40,000. Inti the can say not even pardon the votes of a candidate by one vote should be tolerated. 2012 MPP for court with an election petition to challenge the results no. Afarijan ye na juma kama when we are banimuntino. Omo enya dance here and fa establish even one case of pardon. It is a year and now overvoting. It is a year yet me the dance ba na eno kire say over 5,000 emma amampenye Kufuor enya ye de manwa. Untumi nka say oh ye bo kro no de be kro no ni so nti enye hwe ye mpe kro no bia e wo yabatu. The atoson a coalition papa bia ankoso at the National Coalition Center. Moankasa muhubi isi for baby omo ka se omo bebo aba to no Ghana resource ni nyina nsunsuanso no kwanye ho no moye no isan se emra ye agents a na e coalition center ho free ho pe na chesentem pa omo koye sa recorded declaration e ko wi achire ne nam se na omo bokro no nti omo pepro omo hunti no omo percentages impo ye keka bo mu ni nya more than 100 abra ye nim se won kontamu no ntimi nya more than 100%. So yanye coalition papa bia there, and that is why we have from 8 you can say from 13 omodeba Supreme Court na frakadam ayemu man because they did it after the declaration. Now abusuafo the are wo kra wo mu ne say afie atwa mu yabatwe ene abatwe di kan wo Ghana bakosemu a yato a Ghana this year eboro 20,000 ni actually from about 4 communities. Santro Kofi, Akpafu, Likpe, Lolobi communities in the Uti region. Ye omototwene ya mo manto abanyi mrahye bedwani amananko si omanai e wo mrahye bedwafi. Ebi nsi Ghana bakosemu da. It is a way to organize the election. Now they are disenfranchised thousands of Ghanaians. Are more a right to choose a member of parliament to represent them in parliament. To mean say why are they BC than Tima Antonium and Fro? A BM and the chat work rano. The easy for the to just say. I fear about your my idea pa. Nasika cry wasn't Kaumode about one word humano. Omer to me, Abwa, Asivu bear $90 million in Tigana, Yan Faso. We shall no say an adjo man as it's answer with ye, my midget men are some kind. Now, I'm far dancing be a map. Sika send you chamao, send our use, and what dance and the same. Now, because when you fast $90 million, yet Timias young say, what kind of credit? Why my BBR? The okay, say, oh, 59% of your budget pen will use here. What are the figures? Now, the air can say, Yakotwaba, or the Ghana Fusika, Aqua Koto technology be I say, bit me penny na identify no. It will possess idea we win here when tea or the Ghana Fusika Koto. About 1 million sa technology no anyejuma. It will crown what Ghana car or maybe so akasamri so for willfully causing financial loss to the state. And on Nanchen, where you might have more far or more 100,000. Now, more year about we will man be seen a munti or moka. Now we are Jumana Winyante te, o can ye, Utimian Faso. Unyantia would you my of work and in Fasono, Unyan away. Na yakan see a you know. Na the Wakafa a year in Susuye and Naya. Easy for the abetu jase and no more pese, ye koya nimi, or more de gugu aquemu, na ya the year Juma, 2024 election muno, and also ye the adventure at Gawa home. The decline or Musu 2024 about one eye betono. ɛbɔ no miɛnsa ɛwɔ sɛ yɛpɔn abusuafo yɛn kama ne nwa saa nhyehyɛ yewi deɛ wɔka fa ho nyina ne sɛ yɛn hyehyɛ yɛbɔ ne a isifoɔ no MCC bi ɔmo nya nwen ho nkɔ akyiri yie because ɔman yɛ akɔm behu sɛ ɛde ɔhaw ɛna ɛbɛbrɛ ɔman Ghana in the year 2024 esan sɛ Ghana nyina nte sɛ nka yɛwɔ Ghana miamia bebree a ansa na obi bɛkɔ baabi a ɔto aba no agye sɛ watwa nsuo pantu na yɛde twa nsuo no so de betumi aba sɛ ebia yɛ baako pɛ ɛno nko ho asɛm enye easy wokɔ Ghana baabi obi kɔ afuom wie obi kɔ adwuma wie ansa na wakɔ akɔto aba wokɔ Ghana miamia bebree a emra yɛto aba in fact 2020 abato akwesi baabi bebree wɔ ha enyema na yɛde to aba na nkontem ebi wɔ abɛ 10 am 11 am na nkɔe ebi su kura wɔ ha enyema na kɔ a yɛto aba na fidie kura timi yɛden ɛsɛe esan sɛ ɛyɛ fidie agye si ayɛ ho adwuma ansa enti saa challenges nyinaa wɔ hɔ a na yɛto yɛ aba yɛpɔn 5 bibi ansesa yɛde enti na wɔ abɛte time no so akɔ 3 pm ɛdeɛn problem na we try to cure by changing the time from 5 to 3 problem bɛn na wo sisi nti saa adeɛ no ɛnsɛ ya yɛnyɛ ne yie 5 pm ya ɛno saa mmerɛ no ne yɛpɔn wɔ abatoɔ mu no yɛde ayɛ adwuma free 92 besi na ayɛ adwuma deɛ enti na 2024 deɛ wopɛ sɛ mode time foforɔ bi ba ɛde pressure bɛba polling agents yɛtie no ɔsɛ o 2020 abatoɔ no yɛto yɛ no koraa no na long queue biara ni polling station biara abranya yɛ wɔ ha nyina nim sɛ ɛnyɛ nokorɛ nti yɛbɛsrɛ ne sɛ 5 pm na yɛde yɛ adwuma no woma no nyina hɔ a in fact yɛn nyina yɛnim sɛ tɔda bi koraa yɛto aba no na challenges bi ba polling station a ɛtɔda bi anwummerɛ nɔnson koraa no na yɛgu so to so ɔho nti yɛmpɔn 3 nyɛ deɛn yɛmpɔn ntɛm na ɔntimi nkɔ have dinner anaasɛ sɛn there is no justification for this proposal nti yɛbɛsrɛ mo sɛ yɛdaeɛ bi na ɔmo so a ɔmo nya ne because we deɛ ɛnya de Ghana fo we nya NDC fo nko a bɛnya de Ghana fo kra bɛyɛ den ɛbɛte aseɛ deɛ tɔ so biem ɛyɛ ɔmo nsusu yɛ sɛ ɛsɛ ɔmo baba bɛyɛ ade a yɛfrɛ no continuous registration dada registration dada di ntwerɛ na ɛbrano registration a yɛyɛ ma mmabu no afei na ɔmo anya mfie du nwɔtwe no ɔmo twam so sɛ ɔmo ka sɛ ɔmo baba bɛyɛ dada edi ntwerɛ na deɛ friend continuous registration na nka obi ani ɔmo ni problem because ɛno deɛ ɛwɔ mmara ni mu dada ɛnya ade foforɔ but sɛ woka sɛ wode dada di ntwerɛ no ɛba bɛhyɛ brano di ntwerɛ na ayɛyɛ na ɛma ɔmo afei na ɔmo anya du nwɔtwe na ɛnyɛ yie because dada di ntwerɛ no yɛyɛ no district offices of the EC ɛnyɛ obi a na betumi atu kwan afiri na kura ase na wakɔ saa office hɔ saa system no so yɛ online system sɛ nipa bebree ko good district offices hɔ a ɛbɛgyame ɔmo de bi yɛ bi before the district assembly elections and we had saa challenge no ɛno so nankyɛn no political party agents ɛyɛ ana yɛ ni district offices hɔ ɛno nti na wɔ EC fo nhyehyɛ yɛ mu no yɛayɛ ne sɛ efie da bi etwa bosomi bi ato no ɛne yɛbɛyɛ continuous registration na aboa ma parties ni nyinaa de ɔmo agents aba bɛ observe process na at the district office this is what I say ubetwa we mu na yenye periodic registration of ɔmo manya 18 years biem na de bia wo ye registration na just say was a political party bia no employ party agent our district office bia for 4 years de bia ɔmo te wo na de bia ɔmo te wo no how would they even be able to verify ɔmo so mba be register no ɔmo claims they say me too kwan free makura akɔ me district capital na me say me to aba wo a certain polling station abra enye ho kra na mete a what district office wa obey den why dey wo enti ye be stress continuous registration ne de omo be hyemu kina na akoso because sana mra ne ka na mmom brano registration di ntwero no e wo se ye ka ho one cannot be the substitute for the other the toso biem eye voter exhibition no so mo pese omo de abelfo mfidi sem bi bam na utimi ehwe wo details e wo phone so obusafo we dey yakase nkenya asembo ne kai asem de because baby we ase kono e wo se ye dey abelfo ye adwuma de higher ne se Ghana se no hia si wa ha no wo ka se wo the system we ye adwuma na wo de the normal exhibition exercise na ye na to nchen a emfa e de wo ha obeba isan se nya Ghana ni bia na wo mobile phone enti se me ma me anti akosu a wo wa manafo ni mobile phone na enya de a wo ka se omo bobo code bi no fa ncheke ne din ne details were register ni mu a obetumi aye. And also nanche nansia yebeto aba ye use our system no. Yehu or how bebre wum. Obetumi check in details e wo phone so. Obeko polling station wa kwa check no na e different. And also nanche no exhibition no yenye se na be ya voters betumi check your mudin were register ni mu nko a eno ye ba ko. But ye se na be ya omo omawu ye betumi ayi omudin free register ni mu. Omo amonya Ghana fo na omunya mfie du nwotwe a omatwere omudin ubetumi a challenge omo na ye omudin free register ni mu ene de keka ho enti se wo se wo de abefo sembeba exhibition ni mu a eye ye pene so na emum eni said ye no bra no after the dro no ye to eno edo to twene ena de atwa to efa omunsusu ye no ho ye omunsusu ye o ma ye ne se ye to aba wo Ghana na ye pon a na polling station bia ye hu results na ye ko constituency coalition center ye keka ni nyina bom na ye hu candidate bia results a Jimensa said your person ye ne say or the results ni nyina begu IT system bi mu now the results ni go IT system ni mu a na omo original coalition center no ya generating reports e the amount original reports now national coalition center so a na sa IT system na generating report amount meaning say at the National Coalition Center, no, ye coalition bia. Into coalition na ye no constituency na ye feeding into a system no, and then they be generating a national report amount. Clearly, no, ye mra ye won't see no support because ye mra na say was ye coalition, ewo constituency, and a national, especially because national honor and a returning officer for the presidential election no, or constituency and contable no crown for so betimi abam a national ye be correct no. Ena yaso enim say abefo nyema yi say wo ka say wo the transfer data or how be briti bi bam nipa bonifo bi betimi ayeden a hack system no system bi anyway wo wiase a untumi hack nti yes ye enter data no into the system e wo coalition center but national level no so yenye den yenye coalition no ebi na last but one de ye di kan akyerem efa de nti a ye say wanimanimu ya ide ya twe ye ho afiri ipac mu na de nti a ye kasa ye pese ye kyerɛ ase ma ye titafo ne Ghana fo nyina eti ase ne se enye se bia NDC fo ye pentokwa ana ye pa akinye ana se ya ye adwen dada se de be ya na ye be da bi in the past NDC and Aferijan Charlotte say ye ni EC fo adi kaso won bebre e wo ipac a ye aboa ipac adwuma ne EC adwuma ama sesa bebre aba Ghana bato nti ye nkyiri ipac na emo mo hwe kwan a isi ba no dani Jimensa ne na be de chiri bosman asare de ipac nhihye ye fa so nansia asefem because of my ipac ne say Jimensa ye headmistress and political parties e wo ipac ne students nti oba na wo de nhihye ye betu dwa ye bisa wadwe nkyere de be ye di kan de hye wasese de wo ka no enye by force ye be fa nti wo de opa ka ye be dwen ho ye pa ne ye den ye fa nti na akwa ye se wona wo ho kra no hun hyede ni mfaso bia de to so biom so ne se omo de assemble to ipac anim na ye di hu komo bubu hu wie a na eduru abato a enka ye be ye no based on political party bi ahoden se ne sitie no ye nya ne sa omo akofa some political parties a ebi kra ye nti bi dinda oko ipac ade bi a new political party ba na Jimensa nkwa ne nim sa executives of these so-called political parties, mushroom political parties, or mudi offices, and so they be multi-media letters of invitation to IPAC meeting because Jimensa and Gwan in baby offices war. And when they come, yaka sending in area, or man who's away there, NDC for somewhere then so young fan. Almost okay, and the young twaba. That's how for Nina Equia don't call a palu, we mun no matter almost NDC for Medin Chu. Now your issue statement to say decision IPAC are taking. So even though your opinions were not taken seriously, no, your presence there only serves to invalidate and legitimize the bad decisions they take. I say, IPAC ni take decision na NDC for cry then ewo ho. Enu nti ne say, yemfa mrantai IPAC nhihye ye na chi. Na eno no amma EC chairperson bi kwan ama na anya de ope when treaty political parties anyhow like Jimensa and Bosman Asare are doing. Na biem no kwan a e wo say IPAC fa so edi ne djuma batum ne de keka ho no eno so yenka no wo mbrɛ no ye fi sɛ ye ne sa ebeboa mansesa aba sɛ isifo ɛsesa onsu ne wɔn ban ne kwan a wɔn fa so ayɛ IPAC dwumadie na NDC ever willing to go there. Now even before that no yaka sɛ yɛn susu yɛ a yɛso yɛwɔ after our assessment of the results no yɛde bɛto krataa so ne yɛde akɔ akɔma wɔn as a stakeholder na deɛ wɔn wɔ kafa ho no yɛne wɔn adi ho nkɔmɔ nsɛmtwerɛfoɔ civil society organization nananom atena konwa asɔfoɔ ne chief imam so yɛne wɔn bɛdi ho nkɔmɔ na yɛn nyinaa no yɛde akɔ adwendwen mu ɛsiane sɛ yɛka bima bi nka bi yɛn nyinaa yɛade so a yɛntumi nyae ma isifoɔ nkɔ ɛwɔ sɛ yɛn nyinaa asɔmanfoɔ no yɛboa ma ne kɔ so nti the NDC will be engaging civil society organizations on that. Now even before say committee yapaw no ɛde ɔmo comprehensive report bɛba no ɛne yɛayɛ some preliminary reform proposals because I told you now kasa say ɔmo say okay yɛdeɛ ne nya mo so mo alternative ne sɛn nti for now these are the alternative preliminary proposals yɛde ato isifoɔ anim sɛ pink sheet a yɛto aba a yɛtwerɛ so no yɛnyusu deɛ mmara ne sɛ yɛwɔ sɛ yɛyusu yɛwɔ baabi a ɔmo de biometric verification device to aba no yɛtwerɛ saa total number ne wɔ hɔ na ɛtumi aboa ma yɛayɛ nkuntabuo ne yie na obi to aba mmienu anaa obi de obi di nto aba a yɛtumi yɛhu saa evidence no on the face of the pink sheet ɛnyɛ saa na afidie no ɛho ama mfasoɔ ballot accounting process no so a yɛyɛ de prevent korɔ no bɔ wɔ abatoɔ no mu no ɛno so ho ama mfasoɔ ebiem yɛaka sɛ stamp a yɛde to aba ɛwɔ Ghana no ɛni sɛ yɛgyae ma deɛ isifoɔ de deɛ ɔmo pɛ ɛna de ma yɛde to aba na mmom yɛnhwɛm ne yɛhu stamp a ɛyɛ the international standards voting ink a yɛde to aba na yɛmfɛ no nhyɛ mmara ne mu ne yɛnhyɛ isifoɔ sɛ abatoɔ biara no ɔmo nyusu ɛno ɛnyɛ saa ɔmo yusu saa office stamp ɔmo yusu no last elections ne mu a rejected ballots no ɛbɛbaa because ɛno no yɛmfa nto aba ɛna ebiem so figures nkuntambu a ɛkɔyɛ basa a afei wi akyire na total valid votes for the elections akɔyɛ boakye bidin no yɛfiri sɛ isifoɔ fa adwumayɛfoɔ a ɔmo nim de competent staff na ɔmo train ɔmo yi a we will be able to solve these challenges. Nti abusuafoɔ yɛda mo ase ɛha ne yɛde bɛsi na yɛbɛsrɛ mo the national chairman and that is why I say the English stations you should keep your cameras in position. The national chairman be making a small point and say the dwumadie no abawie.
Thank you very much. Let me add my voice to my colleagues and thank you for your massive presence here. There are two quick issues that I want to add, and one of them is the party's strong objection to the establishment of the regional coalition centers. We as a party, as indicated, the party has put in place a very powerful committee that is coming out of our proposed comprehensive proposals for electoral reforms. And the committee is headed by the venerable lawyer Nana Todazi, which has Professor Kwabena Ahoy and several other leading legal luminaries and members, senior members of the party working on that committee. And so very, very soon, we give them 6 weeks, almost 3 weeks have gone. In the next 2 weeks or so, a comprehensive proposals for reforms will be made available to the public and to the Electoral Commission and to stakeholders for us to deliberate. But I just wanted that before we leave here, we want to state strongly that we don't need any intermediary between the constituency and the National Electoral Commission when it comes to the coalition and announcing of the presidential results, because we have only one returning officer for the presidential elections, and that returning officer is the Electoral Commissioner. And so no one is given any constitutional right to play that role at any intermediary level. And that is why we believe that the previous arrangement where results for presidential elections are collated at the constituency level and transmitted directly to the EC headquarters must be the order of the day. Because in between the constituency office and the national office, cross-checking becomes very, very easy for political parties to cross-check results that have been transmitted from the constituency to the National Electoral Commission headquarters. And so this animal core regional coalition, we are not going to entertain it again because we believe that it is unconstitutional and it is not helpful, because at the end of the day, if you bring aggregated results from the regional coalition center to the national coalition center, your agents there don't even have the opportunity of cross-checking what aggregated into the regional collated results that have been brought at the national coalition center. It is unacceptable, and that created a lot of credibility for the 2020 elections. Let me also say that I have had the privilege of serving on IPAC for close to 20 years now. And IPAC has been a platform for consensus building. And there has been opportunities where electoral reforms have been proposed. And the arrangement has always been to ensure that key stakeholders in the electoral process are part of deliberations on electoral reforms. In other words, the strength of political parties are considered in all the electoral reforms that has taken place over the period. And I have had the opportunity of participating in quite a number of them. And at any point in time, you have the NDC, MPP, the two major political parties, fully represented, with the minority parties coming together to have one or two representatives to serve on the committee, in addition to other key stakeholders and civil society organizations and some international agencies that fund our electoral processes. We believe that the Electoral Commission should have adopted a rather different approach towards electoral reforms after these elections, by asking the stakeholders, the political parties, to come out with proposals for electoral reforms first, compile them, and then have a meeting where we will put them in a composite form and then discuss them. The Electoral Commission itself lacks a lot of credibility. And for all of you are aware that when G. Mensah was even to appear at the Supreme Court to mount the witness box, everything was done to prevent her from doing that, because there were a lot of questions that has left doubt on the credibility of the electoral process. Again, we have also indicated that the issue of posture, if you have an electoral commission where a deputy commissioner can describe a major political party like the NDC as an existential threat to democracy in this country, and you expect that person to be the umpire who will be refereeing the electoral system, then it leaves much to be desired. So what we want to say is that we respect other smaller political parties and we want to help them to grow. But if you participate in a league process for a league, and about 16 teams played in the league, and then at the end of the league, you are going to review it, and you are bringing people, teams from second and third division who were not part of the competition to come and review that competition, what are they going to review? So political parties which did not even participate in the presidential and parliamentary elections cannot be the ones the Electoral Commission will be engaging to review the election in which they did not even participate in it. If it is about future discussions and others, but to review an election where they did not participate in it and bringing them together. And again, IPAC platform has always been for consensus building until this commission came in. And then the last time that we met with the Eminent Advisory Committee, some of these smaller parties representatives were fighting among themselves in the open about who should represent the parties. Because they themselves came there and they were using party names, and this person said, I don't know you in this party, this person said, I don't know you in this party, and these are the people who are going to represent that party in that, that's very important. I mean, we cannot take our electoral process to this level, low level. And so we as a party believe that elections are very serious business. We invest a lot of money, both human and material resources, in competing in these elections. And the Electoral Commission, which is supposed to regulate the election, should take the process very serious. For me, what is happening now is just a mere joke. And we need to come back
to do serious business if we want to take 2024 and we NDC are taking 2024 very seriously and will not leave any stone unturned in ensuring that the level playing field is provided to ensure that we have free, fair election, which outcome will be accepted by everybody. Again, let me also say that this is the last time that we are going to court. We will settle matters of the election at the polling station. The polling stations and the collation centers. And ladies and gentlemen, let me say that I've participated in elections since 1992 to 2020. It is only in the 2020 elections that military people invaded collation centers. It has never happened. It is only in the 2020 elections that you have military people. Whether they are military or vigilantes, nobody can say. But today, I'm beginning to believe that they are not regular military people, because even DCOP, Opariado, has stated that the people that he was dealing with were vigilante groups. Meanwhile, the national security said they are national security people. National security people have no business during our elections. It is the police which has responsibility. But whom do you blame? The Electoral Commissioner herself has militarized the Electoral Commission headquarters. Today, it is like a war zone. When we are going, we have gone to IPAC meeting. Now, when we are going to IPAC meeting, military people fully armed with AK-47 are all over the place. So, you turn around to say that the security of the election is not in your hands. Meanwhile, you have militarized your own office. And by extension, approve the dispatch of military people to go to collation centers and disrupt processes. That is why we are in court in Techiman. And let me end by saying that if G. Mensah wants to pride herself that she has organized the best of elections, then I want to remind her that this is the first election that has been conducted, and over 16 constituency parliamentary elections are in court for litigation. This is food for thought for you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you very much for coming. We'll get you the press statement that was presented by Honorable Elvis Efri-Ankra, and we will plead with you to wait behind for a few minutes. Akugan will see you before you leave. Thank you.
Safusu wa munuya wa nkana asam. Tema futu sam kakre wa asupeme.